Aaron lived a double life, carefully balancing between two opposing worlds. By day, he was the picture of professionalism, a quiet young man in a crisp suit, blending seamlessly into the corporate grind. His co-workers saw nothing out of the ordinary, just another employee lost in deadlines and boardroom meetings. But when night fell and the hum of the office faded into silence, Aaron stepped into a different reality, one he barely understood himself. Cross-dressing wasn't a choice in the way someone picks a career or hobby. It wasn't planned. It had begun as a whisper of curiosity, a fleeting urge he hadn't dared to examine too closely. At first, it was nothing more than stolen moments, slipping into his sister's clothes in the dead of night, feeling an unfamiliar yet irresistible pull. But what started as an occasional indulgence soon became a part of him, something impossible to ignore. Each time he draped himself in a dress or slipped into heels, the world's weight seemed to lift. The constant pressure of expectations, the rigid demands of masculinity melted away. In those moments, he felt seen not by others, but by himself, in a way he never had before. At first, it was about beauty, about feeling something different, something more. But over time, it became a source of empowerment. Standing before the mirror, he wasn't just an office worker drowning in responsibilities, he was someone real, someone whole. But reality was never that simple. His secret loomed over him, a shadow he couldn't escape. His mother, Catherine, embodied strict traditions and unwavering beliefs. After his father's passing, she had raised Aaron with firm expectations to be strong, to be the man of the house. He knew she would never understand. Telling her would shatter the carefully constructed image she had of him. Then there was Emma. She had come into his life during university, a brilliant, free-spirited artist with a boundless curiosity. She challenged him, fascinated him. If anyone could understand, it would be her. And yet, doubt gnawed at him. Would she see his cross-dressing as a harmless quirk, a passing phase? Or would it change the way she looked at him forever? Could love withstand a truth so deeply buried? For now, Aaron maintained the illusion. At work, his suit and tie were armor, a carefully crafted disguise. At home, he followed the routine expected of him, never stepping out of line. But when he was alone, when the world fell away, he allowed himself to breathe, to embrace the part of him that existed outside society's rules. One Friday night, after a grueling week of keeping up appearances, Aaron sat in his apartment, staring at the hidden collection of clothes in his closet. It had been days since he had last indulged, and the need clawed at him, undeniable. The soft fabrics, the delicate textures, they called to him, promising a fleeting escape, a moment of freedom. Then the doorbell rang. The sudden sound jolted Aaron from his thoughts. His eyes darted to the clock's 7:00 p.m. time, had slipped away unnoticed. His mother, Catherine, had left for the city hours ago to visit her sister, and Emma was out having dinner with friends. The apartment, his private refuge, had been his alone for the evening, a place where he could embrace himself, if only for a little while. But now that illusion of safety had been shattered. With cautious steps, he approached the door and pulled it open. His stomach twisted when he saw his younger sister, Chloe, standing there, smiling warmly. "Hey, Aaron," she greeted. "I hope I'm not intruding. Mom said you were home, so I figured I'd stop by. Is this a bad time?" Chloe had always been different from the others. She never pressed him with questions, never demanded explanations for the parts of himself even he struggled to understand. She simply accepted him. She didn't know about his cross-dressing, not exactly, but she sensed he was different, and she never judged. Her visits were usually brief, a quick hello, a check-in, maybe some leftovers from their mother. But this unannounced visit threw everything into chaos. Aaron forced a casual smile. "No, not at all, just finishing up some work." As Chloe stepped inside, she glanced around the apartment, its soft lighting and familiar furniture exuding warmth. She instinctively made her way to the living room, their usual spot for conversations. Meanwhile, Aaron's heart pounded in his chest. He needed to change fast. "Actually, I just need to freshen up real quick, he said, trying to mask the nervous edge in his voice. Without waiting for a response, he hurried toward his bedroom, mind racing. He couldn't risk Chloe finding out. No one could, not yet. With shaky hands, he stripped off the dress, moving as quickly as possible. But fate had other plans. Just as he was pulling the fabric over his head, a knock. Aaron? Chloe's voice was gentle but tinged with concern. Everything okay? His breath hitched, his stomach clenched. Yeah, just a 1 sec, he called out, his voice an octave too high. He tugged harder, trying to free himself, but the dress caught on the doorknob. Panic surged through him. Another knock, firmer this time. Are you sure? His pulse pounded in his ears. If she walked in now, if she saw. He yanked at the fabric, smoothing it down in desperation. The seconds stretched into eternity, every moment thick with the weight of exposure. Please don't open the door, he pleaded silently. The doorknob rattled. Aaron. His heart slammed against his ribs. He wasn't ready. Not to explain, not to be seen, not to answer the questions he wasn't sure he had answers for himself. All he could do was hold his breath and pray she wouldn't push further. When Aaron dressed up, it wasn't just about the clothes, it was about who he became. The shy, reserved version of himself melted away, replaced by someone bolder, more confident, and undeniably free. In those moments, he felt like his true self. But how could he ever explain that to Chloe or to anyone? Just a minute, he called out, his voice betraying the slightest tremor. He listened as Chloe's footsteps retreated from the door. Yet, instead of relief, a wave of dread crashed over him. Was she suspicious? Had she noticed something off? His mind spiraled with questions, none of which had easy answers. Aaron turned toward the full-length mirror, his reflection meeting him with a mix of anticipation and unease. The soft pink satin dress, adorned with delicate lace trim, felt like a second skin. He had chosen it carefully that morning, allowing himself this fleeting moment of indulgence before the world forced him back into its rigid expectations. The heels, though slightly too tall for comfort, added to the illusion, making him feel more graceful, more poised. His makeup had taken hours spent in private, perfecting each detail. A subtle blend of eyeshadow, a soft pink shade on his lips, small touches that transformed him into someone he wished he could always be. And yet, as he stood there, basking in the glow of his secret self, the familiar pang of guilt gnawed at him. Was he deceiving himself? Was this just an illusion? He wasn't just hiding from Chloe, he was hiding from the world. Most of all, from his mother. If Catherine ever discovered this side of him, it would shatter her. She had always envisioned a traditional life for her son, and Aaron knew deep down that she would never accept this version of him. That thought kept him trapped in a cage of fear and shame, dreading the day when his secret might be revealed. Just as he finished adjusting the hem of his dress, the sudden buzz of his phone shattered the silence. The sound hit him like a thunderclap, making his heart leap into his throat. He turned toward the nightstand. It was Emma. Panic surged through him. He had completely forgotten about her dinner plans. Would she be home soon? Should he fake an excuse, say he wasn't feeling well? The thought of Emma discovering his secret was just as terrifying as the idea of his mother finding out. They had been together for 2 years, a loving, open relationship for the most part. But there was always an unspoken tension, an invisible line he had never dared to cross. If she knew the truth, would she still love him? Or would she walk away? His fingers hovered over the phone as it buzzed again, each ring amplifying the pressure in his chest. He hesitated, knowing that the longer he waited, the more suspicious it would seem. Taking a deep breath, he finally answered. Hey, babe. Emma's voice came through, light and cheerful, completely unaware of the storm raging inside him. How's your evening going? Oh, good. Aaron replied hastily, forcing his voice to stay steady. Just relaxing at home, you know. A pause. He could almost hear the curiosity in her silence. You sure? You don't sound so sure. Aaron forced a laugh, hoping to sound normal. Just a little tired. It's been a long week. You should get some rest then. I'm just finishing up dinner. Should I come over afterward? His heart slammed against his ribs. If Emma showed up now, she'd see him like this, dressed in satin and lace, his carefully applied makeup still fresh. He could never undo the damage that would cause. No, I'm fine, he said quickly. I think I'll just stay in tonight. You enjoy your dinner. You sure? I can bring takeout if you want. We can just relax, Emma offered, her voice tinged with concern. No need, I'll be all right, Aaron insisted, trying to sound convincing. If she found out, he would lose her. And he couldn't lose her. A long pause, then Emma sighed. Okay, but if you change your mind, just text me. I will, Aaron murmured, ending the call before she could ask any more questions. The moment the call disconnected, he slumped against the wall, his mind spiraling. He couldn't keep hiding this forever. The stress was unbearable. But how could he ever tell Emma? How could he risk losing her? Before he could sink too deep into his thoughts, the sound of the front door opening made his breath hitch. Chloe was back. Panic surged through him. Hadn't he been alone just moments ago? His pulse pounded in his ears as a terrible realization gripped him. He had to move now. Without thinking, he bolted for the closet, fumbling to yank the dress over his head. His hands shook, the fabric clinging stubbornly as if refusing to let go. This wasn't like before, when he had time to savor the moment. Now, every second was a countdown to disaster. Chloe had already caught him once. He couldn't let it happen again. Stuffing the dress into the closet, he struggled to fasten his jeans, his fingers clumsy with panic. He barely managed to throw on a t-shirt when her voice sliced through the silence. Aaron, you sure you're okay? You're acting kinda weird. His breath caught in his throat. If she suspected something, it was over. His heart pounded against his ribs, his pulse erratic, his lungs struggling to draw air. Every muscle in his body screamed at him to stay calm, to keep it together. He straightened, forcing his voice into something resembling normalcy. Yeah, just a bit tired, he called back, hoping she couldn't hear the shake in his words. A beat of silence. Then, well, you don't look tired, she said, her voice edged with curiosity. Are you sure you're all right? You've been acting strange lately. Strange. The word sent a chill through him. She was noticing, picking up on the cracks in his facade. If she pushed too hard, if she saw through the lie, everything would unravel. Chloe would never understand why he did this, why dressing this way felt like breathing. And so he did what he always did. He buried the truth and prayed she wouldn't see through the mask. I'm fine, Aaron insisted, his voice a little too sharp, a little too forced. Just not in the mood for anything tonight, that's all. Chloe wasn't buying it. The rhythmic tap of her footsteps against the wooden floor grew louder, each step sending panic racing through his veins. She was getting closer. Too close. His mind scrambled for a way out. He couldn't let her in. He couldn't let her see what was behind that closet door. Chloe, I said I'm fine, he repeated, his tone firm, almost pleading. A pause. Then her voice softer now, but unwavering. Aaron, if something's wrong, you know you can talk to me, right? The words landed like a punch to his gut. Talk. How could he possibly explain this? That it wasn't just about slipping into dresses and heels, it was something deeper, something he barely understood himself. Silence thickened between them, heavy with the weight of everything left unsaid. Then Chloe sighed. All right, she murmured, the door creaking slightly as she turned away. I'll leave you be. Relief flickered in his chest. He was safe. Until he wasn't. A knock shattered the silence. Not on his bedroom door. On the closet. Aaron's breath hitched, his stomach twisted into knots. No, 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 no. His blood ran cold as he turned to stare at the closet, his secret trapped behind its thin wooden doors. He had been careful, so careful. Nothing was out of place. Nothing was visible. And yet, Aaron, Another knock, firmer this time. His fingers dug into the bedsheets, his mind a whirlwind of fear and denial. "Open the door," Chloe urged. "Please." Her voice wasn't angry, not yet, but as she knew if she had seen what then. His heart pounded so hard it felt like it might burst. His body refused to move, every muscle locked in place. "Aaron." He swallowed hard, his throat dry as sandpaper. This was it, the moment he had dreaded, the moment he had spent years avoiding. And there was no way out. "I need to talk to you." Chloe's voice was calm but firm, her words carrying an urgency that Aaron couldn't ignore. She wasn't angry, at least not yet, but the unease in her tone made it clear that she wasn't going to let this slide. She had uncovered his secret, and now there was no escaping the reckoning. The walls felt like they were closing in, the weight of his concealed truth pressing against him from all sides. Aaron's hands trembled as he slowly moved toward the door. He had no idea what awaited him on the other side. Would Chloe be furious? Disappointed? Would she walk away from him, like everyone else had in the past? His pulse quickened as he heard her breathing softly outside, her footsteps shifting as though she, too, was uncertain about what would happen next. He took a shaky breath and, with a heavy heart, opened the door. His chest tightened as he looked at Chloe. She stood in the doorway, her gaze fixed on his, the space between them filled with an unspoken tension. There was no turning back now. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Chloe's eyes flickered between him and the closet, her expression unreadable. The silence was thick with everything they were both thinking, but neither of them could put into words. Aaron's stomach churned, his anxiety rising as the seconds stretched into eternity. Finally, Chloe took a step forward, her voice soft but filled with concern. "Aaron." Her tone was gentle, but there was a note of sincerity that pierced through the fog of his fear. "I don't know what's going on, but you don't have to keep hiding it from me. Whatever it is, we can figure it out. You don't have to carry this alone." Her words cut through him like a knife, and before he could stop it, the tears he'd been fighting so hard to hold back began to fall. This was not what he had expected. He had braced for rejection, for disgust, but instead, Chloe's voice was filled with compassion. It shattered the walls he had so carefully built around himself. "You're not mad?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper, trembling with vulnerability. Chloe shook her head, her expression softening. "No, I'm not mad, Aaron. I'm worried. You've been carrying this burden by yourself for so long, and I can't imagine how hard it's been for you. But you don't have to keep it a secret anymore." For the first time, Aaron felt like the weight of the world was beginning to lift from his shoulders. But before he could fully process the relief, the door behind him creaked open. The sharp voice of his mother, Victoria, sliced through the quiet, cold, and filled with suspicion. "Al," she called, her tone sharp and accusatory. "What's going on here?" Aaron's blood ran cold. No. His heart stopped. His world, his fragile world, was crashing down faster than he could react. He felt paralyzed as Victoria stood in the doorway, her eyes cold with accusation. Her gaze pierced through him like a chill wind, and Aaron's breath hitched. The air in the room felt thick with tension, suffocating him as he struggled to comprehend what was happening. This was the moment he had feared for so long, and now there was no escape. Victoria's voice cut through the air like a blade, sharp and filled with fury. "What is this?" she demanded, her gaze sweeping over Aaron, lingering on the high heels, the soft fabric of the dress, the smeared makeup that he hadn't been able to wipe away in time. Her eyes widened in disbelief as the full scope of what she was seeing hit her like a freight train. Aaron couldn't find his voice, his mind scrambled for an explanation, but there was no escaping this. His deepest, most hidden secret was now exposed, laid bare for the world to see. Chloe stood beside him, her face frozen in a mixture of shock and confusion, her eyes on him like an anchor to a sinking ship. Aaron could feel the weight of her unspoken questions, each one pressing him further into the ground. Everything had changed in that moment. The secret that had once been safely locked away was now a ticking time bomb, and there was no going back. I can explain, Mom," Aaron stammered, his voice barely a whisper, cracking under the strain of the moment. He had no idea where to start, no words to make this right, but Victoria didn't give him the chance to speak. Her face twisted into a cold mask, hardening with contempt. "And Chloe," she snapped, her voice cutting through the air like a lash. "What does she think of this?" Chloe, who had been silent up until now, took a step forward, her expression calm but firm. "Mrs. Carson, please," she said, her voice a steady contrast to the storm in the room. "Let's just talk about this. Aaron is still the same person. This doesn't change who he is. It's just something he's been dealing with." Victoria's eyes narrowed, her lips tightening into a thin, disapproving line. "You don't understand, Chloe. This is wrong. This is not normal. This is a problem, and I won't sit back and let it happen." Aaron's heart pounded, each beat a heavy thud in his chest as he bounced his gaze between his mother and Chloe. The walls were closing in, the ground slipping beneath him. His two anchors, his mother and Chloe, were on opposite sides, and he was caught in the middle of their growing divide. "Mom, please," Aaron pleaded, his voice trembling, barely holding itself together. "I didn't want you to find out like this. I didn't want anyone to know. But this is me. This is who I am." Victoria's face twisted in anger and confusion. "This isn't you, Aaron. This is some phase, some mistake. You need help. You need to fix this before it gets worse." The words hit him like a slap, each one sharp and filled with the sting of rejection. He had heard them before from others who couldn't understand, who saw only the surface. But hearing them from his mother, the one person who had always been there for him, felt like his world was crumbling beneath his feet. Chloe didn't flinch. She stood unwavering beside him, her presence like a silent strength amid the chaos. "Mrs. Carson," she said softly, "I understand this is hard to accept, but Aaron needs your support, not your judgment." The silence that followed was suffocating, thick with the weight of unspoken words. Victoria's eyes flickered between them, her gaze hardening with suspicion. "You're just enabling him," she spat, venom lacing every word. "You're making it worse. I don't know what you've done to him, Chloe, but I won't stand for it." Aaron could feel the venom in Victoria's words like a punch to the gut. Her anger burned through the room, leaving him gasping for air as the sting of shame seared through him. He had never seen her this furious, never felt so small under the weight of her disapproval. Before either of them could respond, the sound of footsteps echoed down the hallway, each step a drumbeat in Aaron's already panicked heart. Who else could it be? Was the world about to know everything? Chloe turned toward the door, her face a mix of concern and confusion. "Who's there?" she called out, her voice shaking. The door to the hallway creaked open, and Aaron's breath caught in his throat as the figure emerged. The moment had come. The tension in the room thickened as Aaron's father, Marcus, stood in the doorway. His expression was unreadable, his eyes sweeping over the scene before him, from Aaron to Catherine, then briefly to Chloe, before settling coldly back on his son. The air grew heavy as Marcus spoke, his voice calm but laced with undeniable disappointment. "What's going on here?" he asked, each word deliberate, a quiet storm brewing beneath the surface. Aaron's stomach churned. His father's gaze was like ice distant, as if he had already reached a conclusion about him. The last thing Aaron needed was his father's judgment to add to the growing storm. I can explain," Aaron stammered, but the words felt empty, meaningless, lost before they even left his lips. Victoria's voice sliced through the air, sharp and accusing. "He's been hiding this from us, Marcus. Dressing up like a woman. We need to do something about this. It can't keep happening." The accusation hung in the air like a weight too heavy to lift. Marcus stood silent for a moment, his eyes fixed on Aaron, not with anger, but something colder disappointment. He took a slow step forward, entering the room fully, but his eyes never left Aaron. It was as though he were trying to make sense of the chaos, but Aaron could see the judgment in his gaze, the silent conclusion forming behind those eyes. Chloe, who had remained steadfast by Aaron's side, now seemed to shrink back, as if unsure how to deal with the growing hostility around them. The walls were closing in, and she was caught in the middle. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Marcus spoke again, his voice low and heavy. "We need to have a serious talk, Aaron. This is bigger than just you. We need to figure out what this means for our family." The weight of his words pressed down on Aaron like an anvil, the ground beneath him slipping away. His family, the people who had always been his foundation, were now looking at him as if he were a stranger. Their expressions, cold and filled with confusion, made him feel as if he was standing at the edge of an abyss. And yet, through it all, there was Chloe, unwavering in her support. She stood beside him, a pillar of quiet strength in the midst of the storm. Aaron turned to her, his eyes filled with fear, uncertainty, and gratitude. Just as he parted his lips to speak, to find some way to make him understand, the doorbell rang. The sound was jarring, a sharp interruption to the already unbearable silence. Who could it be? More people to witness his secret being torn apart? Or was it a sign that things were about to spiral into even darker waters? The screen cut to black. The world stood still as Aaron remained at the center of the storm, his heart lodged in his throat, the weight of his family's judgment suffocating him. The unresolved tension filled the room like an electric charge, thick with the unknown. What would happen next? Would Aaron survive his confrontation with his family? Would they ever accept him for who he truly was, or would they try to mold him into someone he was not? Would Chloe's unwavering support be enough to help him face what was coming? Leave your thoughts and predictions in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for the next chapter in Aaron's journey.